Here I am starting off with a mid-tone. My rose is an orange pink colored rose, so I have chosen an orange pink colored rose, and I'm just applying a mid-tone of the rose color, mid-tone of the color that I have chosen for my rose, and kind of sketching out the petals where I want them to be with a big brush. You can use a very detailed brush or a round brush to do that. So now I am just roughly pulling in some paint in the area that I think my rose will be. So I'm covering the whole area with that mid-tone color, and you can see that I'm being very sketchy and not at all like being very very detailed or very efficient with my brush strokes. These are definitely not perfect brush strokes. All I'm trying to do is block the area with the mid-tone color. Now, only thing that I have tried to do here is kind of put the paint in such a way that the brush strokes are created from outside inwards, and it is kind of centered towards the middle of the rose instead of the brush stroke directions going everywhere. Now I'm coming back with a little lighter shade, adding in a little bit, mixing in a little bit of white with that mid-tone, and with a round brush, and kind of sketching out the inner part of the rose with that sketchy thin brush lines. Now in this case, like I said, if you kind of make the brush strokes far apart, it will look very artificial, very sketchy. So if you kind of overlap the brush strokes one on top of the other, then it will look more natural, like the center of the rose. I will come back with some highlights later, but right now I'm just using a little paler tone than my mid-tone. Next, I am trying kind of to lay in the middle petals, kind of that are around the center, the ones that I would later come back with a thicker brush stroke, the rounded brush strokes that I showed just a little while ago. So I'm just loading on some paint on my brush, mixing in the paint color that I want. Like I said, I'm coming back with a little bit darker color around the lighter color. That will kind of create the sharp contrast and get the feel of the petals the way I want it to. Like you can see, I'm making this area with the fatter brush strokes, the ones that is fatter in the middle and narrower on the sides. These will be my middle petals. Right now I'm just blocking in, so I'm again being very sketchy. And at this point I would like to mention that the whole painting is kind of sketchy. It's a very easy way to draw a rose. It's definitely not the perfect rose, definitely not the detailed rose. It's not done in glazing, so the colors, the lights and shadows will not be perfect. It's just going to give you the impression of a rose rather than being the perfect rose. But at the same time, when you would see the end finished painting, you will see that it is pretty much as close to a rose that you would want it to be. So, this, without much ado, this is a great way of painting a rose if you would, without putting in hours and hours of work just behind one flower. And sometimes when you're a beginner, you don't really want to put in hours of work behind one thing and to perfect it out. So this is a very useful way of doing short studies, and thus coming back with one of the most common subjects like rose. Now you just saw that I started out with the outer petals. I have kind of chosen a paler tone, adding in some more white. And what I'm doing is first applying and creating the edge of the petal, and then pulling in the paint from the edge towards the center. That way our center is darker because it's inside and farther away from the light, and the edges are lighter because that is where the light is reflecting on. I'm coming back with some of the lighter tone in the center as well to create sharp contrast between the darks and lights in the center of the rose. One more of the outer petals. At this point, I'm just keeping on doing the outer petals and the middle petals, coming back with some lighter tones surrounded by some darker tones, finishing off the inner center with some, again, contrasting lights and darks around each other to kind of get the center part highlighted. The contrast here is very important. That will actually give you the implication of the rose. Now, you can spend hours and hours perfecting the rose, but that is not our goal in this particular painting. For that, I would have chosen a very different technique of painting, sketched it out nicely and wonderfully, and then, done one petal at a time, taking a lot of time. That is not our goal here. We just want to do a very quick finished rose at one go, using very little time, and being more impressionistic than being very realistic. So, owing to our goal and our target here, I'm just being kind of sketchy and yet giving you the feel of the rose. Once again, creating contrast, getting more darker tones in the center and lighter tones on the outside edge of the petals. This kind of a painting, contrast has a very important role to play, like I already said, because that is what is going to create the final impression of the painting. And finally, some very bright white, titanium white, coming back and pulling out the edges of the center petals, and also I'll come back with some highlights for the outside petals, middle petals as well, with some bright white to create that hyper contrast that will actually create the best part of the painting. I hope you enjoyed the process and learned something very useful, very quick and yet very satisfying. If you try it out, absolutely do not forget to share it with me on social media. And do not forget to like and comment and subscribe to my videos, because that's the best way. Thank you for watching.